Hi, welcome back guys. This is your Sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Became Jonin Sensei? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. After the Kyuubi attack, the third Hokage died, sealing the Bijou into the fourth Hokage's 3 children. The chakra was split in half and sealed in the 2 of the newborn triplets, Menma and Narumi, while the soul went into the third triplet, Naruto Namikaze, the eldest son of the 4th Hokage. When Naruto turned 10, he noticed that his family was increasingly ignoring him. They didn't even acknowledge that he had graduated from the academy and was considered one of the best Chunin. Over the 13 years following the Kyuubi attack, Naruto faced hostility and neglect from both his parents and the villagers, who viewed him as the Kyuubi, while his parents scolded him for what they called lies about the villagers. Shortly after his 9th birthday, Naruto realized that his parents had no time for him and simply didn't care. He decided to stop seeking their attention and made it his mission to become independent, stepping out of his parents' and siblings' shadows. Now, at 13, he had finally become a jounin and was packing the few belongings he owned to move out. He had already purchased a 2-bedroom apartment in the shinobi accommodation section of the village. Konoha had recently developed a new area for shinobi accommodations, featuring many newly constructed buildings, each with fully furnished apartments. The owners of these buildings were retired shinobi, making it an ideal place for Naruto, who could live among others who respected him for his accomplishments. Later, Minato sat in his office, reviewing the files provided by his assistant about newly promoted jounin. As he reached the halfway point, he glanced at the clock and realized it was 4 p.m., the time for his children to leave the academy. He quickly flashed home to get Kushina so they could pick up the twins, eager to be there for them on their first day. While Minato and Kushina were out with the twins, Naruto had finished packing and was on his way to the new apartment complex. He chose not to take any scrolls belonging to his parents, preferring to rely on the unique styles he had developed over the years. Upon entering his apartment, Naruto headed straight to his room, knowing he would need to gather more items in the morning. The moving process took him 3 hours, as he opted not to use his clones, fearing they might disperse and damage his belongings. Feeling exhausted, he stepped into his attached bathroom and began to undress. As he removed his shirt, he observed the scars on his body, remnants of years of hardship, training, and injuries. Some had faded slightly, but one scar, the number 6, on his chest, stood out. It was a mark given to him by the villagers on his 6th birthday. He also recalled a scar from someone he once considered a friend, Kuratsuchi, a kunai wound just beneath his right lung. They had met during the Chunin exams when he was still somewhat naive, believing that someone as kind as her would want to be friends. That belief shattered when she stabbed him during the exams, marking the end of his blind trust in others. Meanwhile, Minato sat at Ichiraku's with his family, finishing their meal. As they prepared to leave, a brown-haired boy ran into Tucci, who was seeing them out. The boy fell to the ground but quickly bounced back up, smiling brightly. He asked Tucci if he had seen his big brother, Naruto, prompting Minato and Kushina to share a moment of shock and shame. Tucci informed the boy that Naruto was moving into his apartment that day. Minato and Kushina's heads snapped up in surprise at the news. The boy, Kenomaru, nodded in disappointment and walked away as Tucci closed the stand. Minato quickly gathered his family and flashed home. Upon reaching their house, Minato and Kushina rushed upstairs, struggling to accept what Tucci had said. They opened Naruto's room, only to find it empty, with nothing but a bed and a desk remaining. Kushina fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed. That night, no one in the family slept, each trying to console Kushina. The following morning, Minato returned to his office, once again reviewing the new jounin files. As he reached the end, he came across Naruto Namikaze's file, shocking him. His eldest son was already a jounin. After shaking off his surprise, he studied the file more closely and noted Naruto's new address before flashing home. Rushing to his room, he found Kushina still crying. He excitedly showed her Naruto's file, but she quickly snatched it from his hand, gasping at the realization that their eldest had become a jounin. Tears filled her eyes as she thought about not being there to support him during his first significant challenge. Determined to help him, she scanned the page for his new address. Seeing the resolve in her eyes, Minato took her hand, and they high-shined to the nearest point to Naruto's new home. 20 minutes later, they knocked on the door. Naruto, still groggy and mumbling about sleep, opened it and nearly had a heart attack upon seeing his parents. Quickly regaining his composure, he greeted them with a smile, inviting them inside, leaving his parents speechless as they stepped into his apartment, feeling a mix of nervousness and hope. They thought that Naruto would yell at them or ignore them, but he was acting kindly, at least for now. He asked how he could help them directly. Kushina, with tears in her eyes, stuttered that they wanted him to come back to their house. Naruto, with a small smile, replied that he could not and would not return, as he wanted to be independent. Kushina, on the verge of tears, expressed their regret for neglecting him, pleading for a chance to make amends. Naruto, stubbornly insisting on his independence, saw Kushina begin to sob. Minato, trying to comfort his wife, pleaded with Naruto to give them a chance. Feeling a pang of sympathy, Naruto offered to visit them every other weekend. Both parents agreed, relieved that this was better than they had hoped. As Naruto walked through the village, he ignored the glares from the villagers. He reflected on the week, particularly his decision to forgive his parents, believing in giving everyone a second chance. While walking, he noticed a group of children chasing a small object. Curious, he followed them and saw them kicking a small orange fox. He approached, startling the children, and asked what they were doing. One of the braver kids replied that they were hurting the demon. Naruto corrected them, stating that it was just a regular fox. Eventually, the children lost interest and ran. Naruto stepped closer to the fox, which whimpered. He began to pet it, and after a moment, he felt it relax. Realizing it was time to visit his parents for dinner as the sun set, he stood up and started walking toward the Namikaze estate. After a few minutes, he turned around to find the fox following him. Understanding that it wouldn't leave him alone, he picked it up and took it with him. Later, Naruto stood in front of his parents' house. He knocked on the door, and it swung open to reveal Kushina, who hugged him tightly. After a moment, they entered the house, where Naruto saw his siblings at the dinner table along with an unfamiliar girl. In the kitchen, he spotted his father preparing plates. After hugging his father, he approached the table. Feeling nervous, he greeted them, worried that his siblings might hate him, only to be glomped by them. Narumi exclaimed that they thought he would never return. Naruto clarified that he hadn't disowned his family, he just wanted to be independent. He then asked about the girl, who introduced herself as Sakura Haruno, Menma's girlfriend. Naruto introduced himself as their elder brother. They sat down to eat when there was a knock at the door. Minato opened it to find Jiraiya, the toad sage, standing there. After a brief exchange, Jiraiya joined Minato at the dining table. Sakura asked Naruto how many years he had spent at the academy, and everyone turned to him. He replied that he graduated after 1 year at the age of 8, shocking everyone except his parents, who had learned about it from his file. Menma asked who had convinced him to graduate, prompting Naruto to share his story. In his recollection, while training in a field, Naruto had sent a clone to class when an old bandaged man approached him. Curious, Naruto asked if he needed help. The old man inquired when Naruto had started sending his clones to classes. Feeling a bit ashamed, Naruto admitted it had been a couple of months and worried if the man would tell his parents. The old man smiled slightly and assured him he wouldn't, explaining that he was there to make an offer. Intrigued, Naruto asked what kind of offer it was. The man introduced himself as Danzo, the leader of Root, and offered Naruto a place in Root when he became a Jonin or made a name for himself. Naruto raised an eyebrow, asking what Root was. Danzo explained that Root was a form of ANBU that undertook missions considered unsafe for the village's reputation, primarily involving assassinations and erasing all evidence of Konoha's involvement. Naruto nodded, asking if he could see Root's training methods before joining. Danzo replied that he could, but only if he became a genin first. You need to be a shinobi to enter the Root base, Danzo informed Naruto. Naruto pouted slightly, contemplating the implications. He wondered if he would have to wait about 7 years. Danzo smirked, suggesting that it wasn't necessarily the case. He explained that Naruto could graduate at the end of the year if he secured a sponsor from a Jonin or higher and passed all the required tests. With that, the conversation came to a close. In a flashback, Naruto recalled how he had convinced Shursui to sponsor him, leading to his successful completion of the tests. He smiled as he finished recounting the story. Minato, feeling a mix of concern and anger about his son's interaction with Danzo, decided to ask, "Naruto, have you joined Root yet?" Naruto smiled in response, expressing that he had not yet joined but was considering it for the following year. He wanted to gain more experience as a shinobi before committing to an organization like that. Minato nodded, pleased to see that Naruto was approaching this decision with seriousness. Once dinner concluded, Kushina asked if Naruto would like to stay the night. He replied that he would love to, but he needed to return to his apartment because his girlfriend was supposed to visit that evening. Curiosity piqued, Jiraiya asked about this girlfriend, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. However, Kushina swiftly intervened, delivering a light reprimand that sent Jiraiya to the ground. Unbeknownst to Naruto, who was facing away, this exchange occurred behind him. Naruto shared that his girlfriend's name was Ayame Ichiraku before embracing his parents and siblings and taking his leave. He was unaware of the annoyed expression on Sakura's face as he departed. Later, at the Haruno residence, Sakura confided in her mother about Menma having an older sibling and her plan to win over Naruto to access the Namikaze wealth, despite the complication of his girlfriend. Soon, her mother devised a scheme to eliminate Naruto from the picture. Meanwhile, Naruto and Ayame were brainstorming names for their new fox. After some consideration, they settled on Kitsu, and the fox seemed to approve, yipping and playfully darting around. It had been nearly 3 years since Naruto reunited with his family. Today marked his 18th birthday. Ayame and Naruto were busy preparing for the party in their new home, which Naruto had purchased a couple of months prior. The house was situated in the Namikaze Uzumaki clan compound, still under construction, with no walls surrounding it yet. Over the years, Naruto had chosen not to join Root, thanks to Kushina's persuasion. He had gradually grown stronger, preferring to rely on his own abilities rather than seeking help from his parents. When asked about his decision, he would simply say he wanted to learn everything he could by himself before asking for assistance. At the age of 15, he had created his own elemental jutsu, a spiraling disc of wind chakra enveloped in fire chakra. Upon impact, it would explode, showcasing his growing power. As Naruto walked toward the kitchen to grab a snack, he noticed Kitsu, the fox, already there, growling at him. A wave of sweat broke out on Naruto's forehead as he realized he hadn't fed Kitsu in nearly 4 hours. He quickly opened the fridge, searching for the raw rabbit they always kept for the fox. Tossing the rabbit to Kitsu, he watched in amazement as the fox devoured it almost whole. After grabbing a bite to eat, he returned to preparing for the party. He stepped outside to gather some groceries, but as he walked to the store, he felt the glares of the civilians around him. Although he had earned the respect of the ninja community, he had yet to gain the acceptance of the townspeople. He knew that if Minato intervened, it would not change their feelings, they would simply hide their disdain. Finally reaching the store, he collected sake, snacks, juices, disposable cups, and other party supplies. After exiting, he made his way to the Higurashi Ninja store to pick up custom blades for his younger siblings, which he had designed. Once he paid, he returned home to continue the preparations. Meanwhile, at the Haruno residence, Sakura was plotting her plan. Tonight was the night her family could claim the Namikaze wealth. She was getting ready for the party at Naruto's house and had just finished concocting a poison to slip into his drink. Ever since her mother discovered Sakura was in Menma Namikaze's class, she had instructed her to stalk him. However, upon learning about Naruto, Menma's elder brother and future clan head, she devised a plan to eliminate him. With the help of Kaito Yamanaka, Narumi's boyfriend, they aimed to remove Naruto from the equation. Kaito wanted to eliminate Naruto as he would inherit the Uzumaki assets. Once Naruto was out of the way, the wealth would go to Mito, benefiting Kaito significantly and giving the Harunos a voice in shinobi affairs. Now all they had to do was wait for the party to begin. 3 hours later, Sakura and Kaito were frustrated. The poison had no effect on Naruto, but they still had a backup plan. They just needed to be alone with him, and Sakura had the perfect strategy in mind. She spotted Naruto giving a speech and decided to ensure that their plan would not fail like the last one. As Naruto concluded his speech, he announced a significant development in his life. He expressed his joy in revealing that Ayame and he were going to be parents, prompting cheers and congratulations from his family. Sakura seized the moment to approach him, feigning a smile. She congratulated him, and Naruto returned the gesture, jokingly noting that it made her an aunt. When she inquired about Ayame's whereabouts, Naruto explained she had gone to her father's home, who was unwell. Sakura then asked for directions to the washroom, and Naruto kindly offered to show her. As they walked, Kaito had already entered the washroom and waited for Naruto to knock. When he did, Kaito quickly declared it occupied, forcing Naruto to take Sakura to the en-suite guest bedroom. As they entered, something struck Naruto from behind, causing him to lose consciousness. Kaito smirked as he performed a series of hand seals and whispered a jutsu that could replace someone's memories with false ones. Although still a work in progress, it would last about 2 months due to the excess chakra he had infused into it. Nodding at Sakura, signaling he was ready, she tore bits of her clothing and screamed loudly enough for everyone in the house to hear. Kaito activated the jutsu, watching her scramble into a corner. Soon, people rushed in to find Kaito standing over an unconscious Naruto with a lamp in his hand, while a distressed Sakura sat in the corner with torn clothing. Minato, upon seeing the scene, shifted into his Hokage mode and demanded to know what had happened. Kaito, feigning outrage, claimed he had heard Sakura scream and rushed in to find Naruto attacking her. When Kushina asked Sakura for confirmation, she stammered through tears, recounting how Naruto had brought her to the room under false pretenses and then assaulted her. Minato, filled with rage and disappointment, ordered the ANBU to take Naruto to prison immediately, while Kushina looked down at her son, heartbroken. The next morning, Naruto found himself chained in a cell, bewildered by the events that had transpired. As a guard entered with a baton, Naruto questioned why he was there, but the guard silenced him harshly, calling him a demon. "Yes, be quiet," another voice shouted as someone was struck across the chest. For the next few hours, Naruto endured relentless torment from the guards until one of them finally revealed the truth about what had transpired. After the guards left Naruto, who was battered and bruised, they informed him of his upcoming trial, scheduled for 3 days later. He spent the remainder of the day reflecting on the events, believing that his parents would trust him and that he had nothing to fear. The next day, Naruto woke up in a dimly lit room, realizing he was likely underground in a cell for dangerous prisoners. Suddenly, there was a knock. He looked up to see Ayame standing outside the bars. As he attempted to move toward her, he remembered he was still chained. One of the guards opened the door to let Ayame in. As she stepped closer, he noticed her red, puffy eyes, illuminated by the guard's flashlight. "Ayame, please tell me you still trust me." "I didn't," Naruto began, but was abruptly silenced by a slap across the face. "Be quiet, you monster. We all know what you did. I am appalled that I ever trusted you. The villagers were right. You are a demon. I came here to tell you that I am getting rid of this demon spawn in my womb." She seethed before leaving the room, shattering Naruto's heart. On the day of the trial, Naruto sat in the courtroom, waiting for proceedings to begin. Suddenly, the 3 judges Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade entered, prompting everyone to stand in respect. Once seated, Orochimaru called for the defendant. "Could the defendant Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze please enter the witness box?" At that moment, Minato and Kushina stood up. "He is no longer an Uzumaki or a Namikaze. We hereby disown this demon," Minato declared, his voice filled with rage and disappointment, while Kushina nodded in agreement. Naruto watched in shock, realizing his parents cared little for him, and began to contemplate ways to save himself. Orochimaru nodded and corrected himself. "Let me rephrase that. Could the defendant, Naruto, please enter the witness box?" Naruto stood and walked to the witness box. Tsunade looked down at him with disdain. "Now, tell us why you attempted to harm Sakura Haruno." "I didn't attempt anything of the sort. I am being framed," Naruto replied, desperation creeping into his voice. "Do not lie, boy. We already have corroborating statements from eyewitnesses," Jiraiya interjected. "I have done nothing wrong. If you want, you can have any Yamanaka scan my memories," Naruto asserted confidently. He nodded at Inochi, who was in the spectator area. Inochi performed hand signs, and Naruto's body went limp as his pupils dilated. Kaito smirked, unnoticed as he used a memory-altering jutsu on Naruto, which would only last a few minutes. Inochi stood again and declared, "He is lying. I accessed his memories, and he did, in fact, attempt to harm Sakura. Not always. The 3 Sanins find you guilty of attempted harm. Due to your status as a Jinchuriki, we cannot impose a death sentence. No citizen of Konoha wishes to live with scum, so we hereby banish you from Konoha. You will spend 3 weeks in prison before you can collect your belongings and leave," Jiraiya stated. Meanwhile, Tsunade sent a message to the torture and interrogation department to ensure that Naruto would remember his time in prison. 3 weeks later, Naruto had endured severe mistreatment. He had multiple broken ribs, a broken hand, several fractured fingers, a fractured collarbone, a broken forearm, and several wounds on his stomach. As he approached his home, he found it reduced to ashes. Realizing he had nothing left, he began searching for Kitsu. After a few minutes, he discovered its lifeless body in front of his parents' house. Shock washed over him as he realized his parents had taken the only thing he had left. With that devastating thought, he made his way toward the village gates. As he walked, objects were hurled at him by the villagers. He felt stones and sticks strike his head, and he looked at each person involved. Among them, he saw his family, Ayame, Sakura, and Kaito, all throwing things at him. Naruto smiled sadly as he looked upon the great Naruto Bridge, reflecting on the honor of having it named after him. He limped through the Wave Village, searching for Tazuna or his family, while recalling the hardships he had faced over the past week. After being turned away from every village allied to Konoha, he was still injured and in need of help. Upon reaching Tazuna's house, he noticed the transformation from a simple shack to a mansion. He knocked on the door and waited patiently for it to open. When it finally did, Tazuna's initial smile faded into a frown upon seeing Naruto. Tazuna's tone was harsh as he asked what Naruto wanted. Desperate, Naruto pleaded for something to eat, explaining that he hadn't eaten in days. Just then, a brown-haired teenager emerged from behind Tazuna, expressing anger and disdain, claiming they did not want to be associated with him. The teenager spat at Naruto and slammed the door shut, followed by a female voice warning him to leave the village or face consequences. Feeling the sting of their words, Naruto wiped a tear from his eye and turned away, limping through the narrow streets. Suddenly, something struck him on the back of the head. He touched the spot and found it was slimy, realizing he had been hit by an egg. Looking up, he saw several villagers peering out of their windows, glaring at him while holding trays of eggs. More eggs rained down on him as he hurried toward the village exit, feeling the weight of their rejection. By the time he reached the bridge, he was covered in egg whites and yolk. The sky was darkening, hinting at an impending storm. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. Turning around, he was struck on the head with a shovel, causing him to fall to the ground. He struggled to get back up, facing a mob that had gathered, led by the same teenager from Tazuna's house. Another shovel struck him, and with his energy waning, he curled into a ball as the crowd continued to push him down. Normally, Naruto would have escaped easily, but his injuries and lack of food had left him weak. He was unable to use his chakra due to seals placed upon him. Just then, he was lifted by the collar, forced to look up into the eyes of the teenager, now identified as Inari. In a raspy voice, Naruto remarked on Inari's cowardice, which only fueled Inari's anger. Grabbing a pitchfork, Inari attempted to stab Naruto, but with the last of his strength, Naruto dodged and stumbled over the railing, plunging into the turbulent sea below. Exhausted, he lost consciousness upon hitting the water. 2 days later, Naruto awoke in a forest, having drifted ashore. As night approached, he searched for signs of life, desperate for food. Spotting a cabin, he limped toward it, hoping for refuge. After knocking on the door and receiving no answer, he ventured to the back and found the door slightly ajar, showing signs of wear. Inside, he searched for anything useful and discovered a bedroom with a neatly made bed but found nothing of value. In the kitchen, however, he was fortunate to find some stored fruit. After eating for the first time in days, he felt a bit better but still bore the pain from his earlier encounters. He found bandages and painkillers in the washroom, which helped him feel drowsy. Finally, he fell asleep, feeling a sense of safety for the first time in weeks. The next day, Naruto explored the small cabin further. It contained 2 rooms, a study, and a bathroom. In the study, he discovered sealing supplies and empty scrolls. Sitting at the desk, he used a small mirror to inspect the seals on his body, noting them down. Realizing he could release a small amount of chakra, he crafted seals to break the ones placed upon him. After applying them, he released his chakra, and everything went black. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a sewer. He ventured deeper, hoping to uncover something useful. Soon, he entered a room with a massive cage, and a pair of red-slitted eyes opened behind it, startling him. Meanwhile, in a cave near Konoha, a young adult with light blonde hair paused, performing hand signs before slamming his hands on the ground. A projection appeared, revealing a tall man in an orange mask. The man spoke to Kaito, inquiring if he had succeeded in getting rid of Naruto. Kaito responded with a smile, assuring him that Naruto would no longer want to be around Konoha, expressing satisfaction that their plan was unfolding as intended. Tobi laughed at Kaito's words, pleased with the progress. Once upon a time, there was a skilled spy known for their exceptional abilities in stealth and intelligence gathering. This spy operated in a world filled with intrigue and danger, navigating through shadows and whispers. On a mission to uncover a nefarious plot, the spy infiltrated a heavily guarded facility. The atmosphere was tense, with the faint sounds of footsteps echoing in the distance. Every corner held the potential for discovery, and the spy moved with precision, blending seamlessly into the environment. As the spy advanced deeper into the compound, they encountered various obstacles. Security systems buzzed and flickered, and guards patrolled the halls with unwavering vigilance. With a swift movement, the spy evaded detection, using their training to outsmart the watchful eyes around them. Dimly lit room, the spy discovered crucial information that could change the course of events. The files revealed a sinister plan that threatened countless lives. Heart racing, the spy quickly memorized the details, knowing they had to escape before being caught. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. The spy's instincts kicked in, and they sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline fueling their every move. Guards rushed to intercept, but the spy was a blur, dodging and weaving through the chaos. With determination, the spy reached the exit, bursting through the doors just as the guards closed in. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing, a stark contrast to the heat of the chase. The spy took a moment to catch their breath, knowing the mission was far from over. They had the information needed to thwart the impending disaster, but now they had to find a way to share it with the world. As the spy disappeared into the shadows, the weight of their responsibility pressed heavily on their shoulders. They were not just a lone operative, they were a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the brink of chaos. The cabin appeared cozy and inviting, nestled among the trees. Its wooden exterior blended harmoniously with the surrounding nature, creating a serene atmosphere. Inside, the warm glow of the fireplace illuminated the rustic furnishings, making it a perfect retreat for those seeking solace. Naruto gazed at the enormous red-slitted eyes, feeling a blend of awe and apprehension. He instinctively stepped back, noticing the eye gradually rising, revealing the outline of the beast it belonged to. The beast greeted him with a voice laced with sarcasm, welcoming him to its domain. Naruto found himself at a loss for words, surprisingly unafraid. The bijou taunted him, asking how it felt to be abandoned by his parents and to have lost a future child. It pressed on, questioning how it felt to be labeled a RPST and to have once admiring people turn against him. There was a hint of sadness in the beast's voice, which caught Naruto's attention. He responded with a touch of anger, questioning if the beast felt pity for him. The QB vehemently rejected the notion, declaring it would never feel sorry for a human. Naruto's inquiry about the beast's statement caused it to flinch slightly. The QB demanded to be left alone, slamming its tail against the ground, creating a shockwave that jolted Naruto awake. Naruto frowned as he rose from his bed, stretching and grimacing as pain coursed through his body. He clenched his teeth and made his way to the washroom. Standing before the mirror, he examined his body for any missed seals and smiled upon finding none. He inspected his wounds. Most were healing, but some were still in the process of closing. After performing a series of hand seals, a light green aura enveloped his hands as he hovered them above his body, assessing the extent of his injuries. Relief washed over him as he discovered no damage to his neck, back, or head. However, he winced upon realizing he had 18 broken ribs and 2 bruised ones. He continued his examination, finding his right collarbone fractured but healing. Moving down to his arms, he noted that his left forearm was fractured, along with several broken fingers on his left hand. After executing more hand signs, Naruto murmured about a reverse summoning technique, and with a puff of smoke, he vanished. In Konoha, at the root headquarters, an orange mask emerged from a wall, its lone Sharingan scanning the room before the rest of the figure materialized. The man placed documents in random drawers before phasing into the wall again, continuing this process until he reached Danzo's sealed safe. He slipped through the safe and deposited the remaining documents inside. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office, Minato slammed his face into his hand as he reviewed a report from several Jounins. They had discovered hundreds of live exploding tags attached to buildings, including the Hokage Tower. Suddenly, a cat-masked ANBU appeared, bowing before him and announcing that they had found the source of the tags. The ANBU's sharp tone captured Minato's full attention. Minato demanded to know the source immediately. The ANBU reported that root shinobi were responsible for creating and placing the tags. Minato growled in frustration, realizing it was Danzo's doing. He commanded the ANBU, Jounins, and Chunins to prepare for an operation to confront Danzo. With a salute, the ANBU vanished in a burst of speed. Minato removed his Hokage cape, revealing his armor, and quickly made his way to the Jounin commander's office. Some time later, Minato stood before his assembled forces, ready to confront the leader of Root. As they charged toward the entrance, he witnessed Chunins unleashing fireball jutsus and others engaging in combat. Minato decided to join the fray, leaping into action and throwing his special Hiraishin kunai into the battle. As he performed hand signs, he called out a technique, summoning shadow clones of his kunai. Before he landed, he began teleporting to his kunais, taking down any root shinobi in his path. Meanwhile, in Danzo's office, the orange-masked figure heard the chaos outside and smirked. He watched as an alerted Danzo rushed into his office, searching for his summoning scroll. Just as Danzo reached for it, Tobi appeared behind him, swiftly knocking him out. Tobi then placed a kunai in Danzo's hand and slashed his throat, making it appear as a suicide. With that, Tobi vanished. Moments later, the fourth Hokage kicked open the door, gasping at Danzo's falling body. 2 days later, Minato sat at his desk, sifting through documents recovered from the root base. A headache began to form as he came across a file labeled Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Opening it, he saw Naruto's smiling face. Anger surged within him as he examined the file, which contained standard information such as birth date and mission history. Minato paused, scrutinizing Naruto's ongoing missions. To his knowledge, Naruto had no active missions assigned at the time of his banishment. Frantically searching for the mission file, he finally located it. Mission number 27102023. Opening it, he began to read through the mission objectives. Assigned to Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Mission rank B. Mission objectives: supply root with explosive tags. Help root place the tags on significant buildings in Konoha. Help Danzo Shimura take over Konoha. Assigned by Danzo Shimura. Minato stared at the file in disbelief. His son was being tasked with betraying Konoha and his own family. Taking a deep breath, he called for an emergency council meeting. Meanwhile, Naruto emerged from the cabin, coughing. His body had not yet healed from the injuries sustained during his encounters in Konoha and Wave. He looked at the blood on the ground, reflecting on the torment he had endured in the summoning world. For 2 days, the toads had tortured him, refusing to believe his side of the story, and he had ultimately been removed from the summoning contract. As he regained his senses, Naruto instinctively rolled away from an incoming kunai. Recovering from the surprise attack, he spotted the assailant, a figure cloaked in black with white clouds, a hood obscuring his face. The man greeted Naruto in a hoarse voice, presenting an offer. He then removed his hood, revealing long black hair and a scarred face. A small red-haired girl fled from a mob of villagers wielding pitchforks, sticks, and rusted weapons. She ran as fast as she could, darting into alleys. In her haste, she stumbled over a foot protruding from a wall, hitting her head on the pavement and nearly losing consciousness. As she turned to see who had tripped her, she recognized the blonde-haired child smirking at her. A tear rolled down her cheek as she realized it was her best friend, Kai. Before she could react, a villager struck her on the head with a rusted metal rod, knocking her out. The red-haired girl jolted awake in her room, realizing she had experienced another nightmare. She wiped the sweat from her face and stepped into the shower. As the water cascaded over her, her thoughts drifted. Ever since she could remember, she had been hated by those around her, first her mother, then her classmates, and eventually most villagers. This was not the first time she had been attacked. Ever since her mother had died 5 years ago, she had faced constant hostility. The greatest regret she harbored was revealing her father's identity to her classmates, especially after being bullied for not knowing who he was. In a flashback, the 5-year-old girl had woken up to her mother muttering in her sleep. Curious, she shook her mother awake, asking about Naruto. Her mother, still groggy, responded but abruptly lashed out, forbidding her from mentioning her father, whom she referred to as a demon. The encounter left the young girl stunned and confused, leading to her fainting. The following day marked what she considered her worst day, as the village discovered her father's past. During class, Irika, the head teacher of the Shinobi Academy, explained the family tree of the Yondaime Hokage, detailing the tragic fate of Naruto, who had been banished and labeled a traitor. The class gasped collectively when they learned of his banishment and the reasons behind it, including the fact that he was a Jinchuriki, which prevented him from receiving a death sentence. Amime, the red-haired girl, listened in awe as Irika recounted Naruto's transformation into a high-ranking missing ninja, known by various aliases due to his formidable abilities. The class turned silent when Kai pointed out Aime's resemblance to Naruto, sparking murmurs among her peers. Amime despised that day, recalling how she had excitedly shared her father's name with her classmates, only to be met with coldness and isolation afterward. That day marked the beginning of her torment, culminating in her first beating on her way home. Later that year, her mother succumbed to alcoholism, a consequence of her father's banishment. Now, 8 years later, Amime was set to become a genin. She had dedicated her life to confronting her father to earn the respect of the villagers. Stepping out of the bathroom, she walked into her room toward her bedside table to grab her kunai pouch. She left the apartment, ready to attend her final class. Meanwhile, Minato sat in his office chair, looking at his family photo. He gazed at the smiling faces of his family members. Menma wore a carefree smile with his arm around Narumi, who maintained a serious expression. Behind them stood Minato and his wife, Kushina, both smiling like Menma. Minato frowned at Narumi's demeanor. It had been 12 years since the Akatsuki attacked their village, revealing something that changed their lives, particularly Minato's and Narumi's, as they still hadn't shared it with Menma and Kushina. Flashback. The Akatsuki had finally been fended off after a long and arduous battle that resulted in many casualties on Konoha's side, while only one Akatsuki member was killed and another captured. Minato sat in the council chambers as one of the clan heads accused another clan member of treason. Ino spoke up, acknowledging the seriousness of the allegation against Minato's future son-in-law. She mentioned hearing Kaito talking to someone named Toby at night. Minato straightened up at this revelation and ordered the ANBU to bring in Kaito, ensuring he was restrained with a chakra-suppressing seal. He turned to Narumi, who was filling in for her injured mother. Minato urged her to make decisions with the village's interests in mind, and she nodded in understanding. Suddenly, the ANBU reappeared with Kaito, who looked shocked and confused. Minato formally accused Kaido of treason based on Ino's claims and announced that a mind search would be conducted by Inoichi Yamanaka. Kaido attempted to use his chakra but found himself unable to do so before everything went dark. Inoichi navigated through Kaido's mind, searching for significant memories. He stumbled upon one featuring a masked figure in an Akatsuki cloak. As he approached, he heard the figure, Toby, discussing plans to attack Konoha in 3 days. Kaido inquired about his orders, and Toby instructed him to secretly eliminate as many Konoha shinobi as possible. The conversation revealed that Toby had orchestrated Naruto's banishment and declared him a terrorist. Inoichi continued searching for the memory of Naruto's initial accusation by Sakura. He discovered a memory where Kaido hid in a restroom, then emerged to find Sakura following Naruto. Kaido knocked Naruto out, and Sakura, in distress, began to tear her clothes, signaling for help. The Hokage's family arrived promptly. Minato, assuming his Hokage persona, demanded to know what had occurred. Kaido, filled with anger, accused Naruto of attacking Sakura. When questioned, Sakura tearfully confirmed Kaido's claims, stating that she had asked him for help and he had betrayed her trust. Minato, filled with rage and disappointment, ordered the ANBU to take Kaido into custody. The memory ended. Inoichi withdrew from Kaido's mind and reported to Minato that Kaido had knowledge of the attack on Konoha, having been informed by Toby. He explained that Kaido and Sakura had conspired to frame Naruto. Sakura was brought in for questioning, and her mind search corroborated Inoichi's findings. In a fit of anger, Narumi attacked Sakura, and despite Minato's attempts to intervene, she managed to harm Sakura before being restrained. Flashback end. Minato ordered Aiko to serve a life sentence, and the council members swore to keep the matter secret to protect Kushina from further distress. Sighing, he looked at the stack of papers before him, which included team assignments. One file caught his attention, a photo of a red-haired girl with whisker marks. Her name was Amime Ichiraku, and it froze him in place. This was the first photo he had seen of his granddaughter, a painful reminder of his decision to keep Narumi from contacting her after learning of her existence. Meanwhile, Menma and Kushina wanted nothing to do with Amime. Meanwhile, in Tanigakure, Naruto sat on his couch, reflecting on the banishment order from the council nearly 14 years ago. His banishment was set to expire soon, coinciding perfectly with the upcoming Chunin exams. He had just been promoted to Jonin Sensei that day. Flashback. Naruto stood before the daimyo of the Land of Rivers, expressing his reluctance to take on the role of a sensei. The daimyo insisted that he would become one, regardless of his feelings on the matter. Tanigakure is the only shinobi village governed by a daimyo. Naruto had developed a close friendship with the daimyo, a bond formed during their time together in the White Dawn nearly 14 years ago, when Akura had recruited him. DMN that Akura, Naruto muttered while lying on a random person's roof, reviewing the files of his future students. He thought about the trio he would be mentoring, an unskilled fangirl, a class clown who finished in the middle of his graduating class, and a wannabe, cool kid, who also landed in the same spot. Cursing his luck and his leader, he checked his pocket watch and noted that he had an hour until he needed to pick up his new team. With that, he vanished in a flash. In Konoha, Amime stepped out of her rundown apartment, determined to start her ninja career. Today was significant for her. It brought her one step closer to confronting her father. As she made her way to the academy for team assignments, she overheard villagers muttering unkind remarks about her. They referred to her as demon spawn and made cruel comments about her red hair, attributing it to the Kyuubi. Amime lowered her head, clenching her fists as she walked, knowing she had to prove herself before the villagers would ever accept her. Meanwhile, Narumi stormed through the Hokage tower, her anger palpable as she was given a wide berth by the shinobi and staff. She kicked open the door to the Hokage's office, causing Minato to tumble from his chair. He shouted for her to explain her actions, but she interrupted, demanding that he include Amime in her team as he had promised. Narumi's frustration boiled over as she recounted the broken promises regarding Aime's training and protection. Minato, trying to remain calm, explained that the council had deemed someone else more suitable to train Amime. He mentioned that they had selected Konohamaru due to their shared elemental affinities and combat styles. Narumi felt a wave of sadness wash over her, wishing Amime could have someone who cared for her. Minato reassured her that he wanted Amime to be safe and proposed a long-term mission for Narumi, to follow Amime on her missions until he was confident that Konohamaru could handle the responsibility. In Tanigakure, Naruto approached the classroom where his potential team awaited. He had considered using the traditional bell test but decided against it, wanting to teach them independence and teamwork without fostering dependency. As he opened the door, a bucket of water flew toward him. Assessing the situation, he noted that only 3 students remained in the class, meaning they were his team. One student smirked, another looked horrified, and the last one eagerly eyed the bucket. Recognizing the eager one as the culprit, Naruto quickly switched places with him. Now relieved, Naruto examined his team. The smirking boy, who now wore a shocked expression, had unkempt red hair and a lean build, dressed in a combat-modified kimono. The only girl, still staring at the bucket in horror, had turquoise hair tied in a ponytail and wore white harem pants, a white shirt, and a blue vest. Finally, the drenched class clown had ash blonde hair and a bulkier frame, dressed in black pants and a simple white shirt, with a small cape featuring a black bull emblem. Naruto instructed them to meet him at Genin Training Ground 30, adopting a no-nonsense tone before disappearing in a flash. He arrived at the training ground and settled beside a tree, waiting for his team. An hour later, his students arrived, 2 of them breathing heavily while the third was noticeably winded. Naruto directed them to sit beside him and introduced the session. He asked each of them to state their name, likes, and dislikes. The ash-blonde boy eagerly declared himself as Riku Yoshida, sharing his interests in bowls, pranking, and sparring, while expressing his dislike for genjutsu. The red-haired boy introduced himself as Boten Uzumaki, mentioning his love for ninjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and fuinjutsu, while also disliking idiots. The fangirl, blushing and glancing at Boten, introduced herself as Ayaka, echoing Riku's sentiment about disliking idiots. With introductions complete, Naruto prepared to start the test, but Riku interrupted, asking if Naruto would share something about himself. Riku expressed his surprise as he processed the information about the test. Naruto explained that while they had been made genin of Tanigakure, they were not yet his students. He clarified that due to Tanigakure being a new and smaller village, they needed to maximize the number of shinobi. If a new team failed their sensei's test, they would be placed in shinobi reserves, limited to D-rank missions until they could eventually attempt a C-rank mission with a temporary sensei. At any time, a village jounin could give a team from the reserves another chance at having a sensei. Naruto then announced the start of the test, instructing Riku to stand up. He explained that they would spar for 1 minute, with Riku needing to hit him twice. Using any techniques, while Naruto would only use taijutsu. Riku nodded, taking his stance. As Naruto turned his back to set a timer, Riku initiated the attack with a water technique. Naruto skillfully dodged the water bullets and countered by sweeping Riku's legs, causing him to fall. However, Riku had used a substitution technique, replacing himself with a log. Later, Team Naruto walked through the bustling streets of Tanigakure, eager for their next mission. They had been gaining experience through simple patrols, as the village lacked a police division. Upon reaching the daimyo's office, they heard a buzzing sound from Naruto's earpiece. He quickly put it in and, after a moment of quiet conversation, looked at his team with urgency, indicating they had a mission. With a swift movement, he transported them right in front of the daimyo's office. After knocking and receiving permission to enter, they were greeted by the daimyo, who had a mission for them. He informed Naruto that they were to travel to Tatsuyama village, located in the south of Hai no Kuni, which was the last village before Nami no Kuni. The daimyo revealed that a businessman named Kojiro from Fusha, Maizo no Kuni, was planning to sell stolen blueprints to a terrorist organization from Kaze no Kuni. He emphasized the importance of assassinating Kojiro and recovering the stolen file, noting that Kojiro would have a genin team from Konoha as bodyguards, and Naruto was instructed not to harm them. Naruto confirmed their readiness to leave in 1 hour and instructed his team to gather essentials for 3 weeks, including clothes, rations, kunai, first aid kits, and sleeping bags. He also reminded them to inform their families about the mission and to assure them of their return in 6 weeks. When Riku attempted to ask a question about the timeline, Naruto promised to explain later as he shined away to pack. Meanwhile, in Konoha, Konomaru Sarutobi discussed his Genin team with the Hokage, who assessed their readiness for a more complicated mission. The Hokage felt a pang of guilt as he looked at his granddaughter Amime, who resembled Naruto. He assigned the team to escort a businessman named Tojiro to Tatsuyama and protect him until his business deal was complete. After confirming their understanding, Konohamaru instructed them to meet at the South Gate in 1 hour and to pack essentials for 2 weeks before leaving. Back in Tanigakure, Naruto inspected his team's bags, praising them for bringing only the essentials. He warned them that if they had made any mistakes, he would have made them carry everything, including his own backpack. When Ayaka inquired about his backpack, Naruto revealed that he had sealed it away. He then demonstrated the sealing technique, ensuring their backpacks were secured to their arms. Before departing, Riku raised a question about the 6-week timeline for their mission. Naruto explained that it was an assassination mission, and they needed to wait for the right moment to strike. He advised that telling their families about a 3-week mission could cause unnecessary worry if complications arose. Ayaka then asked why the daimyo specifically instructed Naruto not to harm the Konoha team. Naruto simply acknowledged his feelings about Konoha, and his students nodded in understanding. That's why the daimyo singled him out. He glanced at the watch on his wrist and noted that they had 5 minutes before departure. Naruto spoke casually, revealing his thoughts. Ayaka, curious, inquired about his feelings toward Konoha. He explained that he had once been a Konoha shinobi before his banishment. The village had labeled him a terrorist, and even now, ANBU agents were sent to hunt him down. This was the reason for his disdain toward Konoha. Curiosity piqued, Ayaka asked why he had been declared a terrorist. Naruto recounted his past with Konoha's 2 special ops organizations, ANBU and Root. He had been part of Root for a time and was assigned to create non-functional exploding tags, which were to be placed around Konoha while the rest of Root searched for and disarmed them. Unfortunately, the Hokage had not been informed about this training exercise. After Naruto's banishment, the Hokage discovered real exploding tags and mistakenly believed Naruto was responsible. This misunderstanding led to his name being placed in the bingo book. Seeing the shocked expressions on his students' faces, Naruto instructed them to get into formation as they prepared to leave. 2 hours later, as the team entered the Land of Fire, Ayaka asked why he had chosen to join Tani. Naruto explained that after his banishment, he had traveled to Wave and then found himself in the Land of Rivers, where he met Akura, who convinced him to help create Tani. Riku expressed amazement at Naruto's involvement in the creation of Tani. Naruto confirmed this calmly. Boten then asked about his journey to Wave. He shared that at the age of 10, he had gone on a mission with his team to liberate Wave. He had hoped to be welcomed there, but instead, the villagers sided with Konoha and attacked him, throwing him off a bridge into the sea. By chance, he ended up in the Land of Rivers, where he found a cabin and healed. It was there that Akatsuki found him, attempting to recruit him. At the same time, Akura discovered him and helped him fend off Akatsuki, leading to Naruto's assistance in Akura's rise to daimyo. Having shared his story, Naruto instructed his students to work on their seals, signaling the end of their training for the day. Team Naruto rested, watching their sensei train after he had finished their session. They had been on the move for the past week and were only a day's travel away from their mission location, tasked with intercepting Kojiro before he reached Tatsuyama village. Riku was curious and asked how old Naruto was when he became a genin. Naruto paused his training to think, then replied that he was around 8.5 or 9. Riku's mouth dropped in surprise, and Boten looked equally astonished. Ayaka then inquired about Naruto's current age. He shared that he was 31, having been banished at 18, which was 13 years ago. When Boten asked when he became a Chunin and Jonin, Naruto reflected on his past and answered 10 and 13, respectively, recalling the missions he had undertaken and the teammates he had lost along the way. Naruto then declared it was time for everyone to sleep, assigning watch duties. Boten would take the first watch, Naruto the second, Ayaka the third, and Riku the fourth, with each taking 2 hours. The team quickly settled into their sleeping bags. An hour later, Boten sat near the campfire, observing Naruto as he continued to train. After a few minutes, Naruto approached him and pointed out that he was not fulfilling his guard duty properly. He encouraged Boten to get up for a walk. Boten groaned but complied. Naruto then commented on Boten's training style, suggesting it did not reflect that of an Uzumaki, which sparked Boten's anger. He began to protest, but Naruto interrupted him sharply, causing Boten to flinch. Naruto explained that he meant Boten wasn't training in the traditional Uzumaki taijutsu style or their sealing arts. Boten admitted that he lacked proper training after losing his parents and only had one scroll left, which contained level 9 seals he couldn't understand. In response, Naruto rolled up his sleeve and summoned a scroll containing level 1 Uzumaki techniques, offering it to Boten. He explained that he had once been an Uzumaki before his banishment and urged Boten to start training with the scroll the next day before sending him off to sleep. The following day, Team Naruto continued their journey through the dense forests of the Fire Country, now just an hour away from Tatsuyama Village. Naruto suddenly called for a stop, instructing everyone to prepare for an ambush. He assigned Ayaka to deliver the final blow while reminding her not to harm the Konoha shinobi. Although nervous, Ayaka was reassured by Naruto's confidence in her abilities. Riku and Boten were designated as distractions, and the team began to strategize while Naruto took a position on a tree branch to supervise. An hour later, the team was ready as 5 figures emerged from the forest. Riku and Boten jumped down to confront the Konoha team, demanding they hand over Kojiro. Naruto, observing from above, thought about their intimidation tactics and fell back asleep. The 2 male Konoha shinobi stepped forward, refusing to comply. Just then, Ayaka leaped down behind Kojiro, poised to strike. However, she found herself unable to move as the Konoha sensei restrained her arm effortlessly. Fear gripped her as he spun her around and placed her in a headlock, threatening her with her own kunai. Riku and Boten exchanged worried glances and, after a brief moment of hesitation, surrendered, pleading for Ayaka's release. In response, the 2 Konoha genin knocked Riku and Boten out and quickly tied them up, preparing to interrogate the 3. As they began their questioning, Naruto awoke to the commotion and recognized the Konoha sensei as Konohamaru Sarutobi. Filled with a fierce determination, Naruto jumped down, radiating an intimidating presence that froze the Konoha team in place. Without uttering a word, he moved to his genin, tending to their injuries while maintaining his intense aura. Konohamaru, wide-eyed, could hardly comprehend the level of intent emanating from Naruto. Noticing that he had run out of bandages, Naruto removed his shirt, revealing numerous scars on his body. Konohamaru's gaze fell on one particular scar below Naruto's neck, which read, "Demon." Recognition dawned on him as he recalled the time he had inflicted that scar during Naruto's imprisonment, a memory that brought back feelings of betrayal and regret. Konohamaru expressed his frustration, declaring that he should have listened to everyone who warned him about Naruto being a demon. He felt the need to prove to those around him that he was not influenced by Naruto's presence. As he pointed at the people behind him, Naruto's eyes adjusted to the scene, revealing his siblings and Konohamaru's friends. Tears welled up in Naruto's eyes as he watched Konohamaru approach with a kunai in hand. Konohamaru moved behind Naruto, heating the kunai as he began to carve the word, "demon," into Naruto's upper back. He continued to strike at him, shouting in anger. When the flashback ended, Naruto swiftly turned around, revealing the scars on his front. He walked over to the unconscious Kojiro, lifting him up. Creating 3 clones, he gathered his students and passed by the Konoha team, who stood in shock. The genin felt overwhelmed by the killing intent radiating from Naruto, while Konohamaru remained frozen, his face pale. After a few moments, Konohamaru regained his movement and attempted to chase after Naruto, only to collapse, followed by his own team. Amime, filled with fear and confusion, asked who or what that was. Konohamaru took a moment to think before confirming that it was indeed Naruto, shocking everyone nearby. Amime insisted they needed to pursue him since he had their client, but Konohamaru firmly rejected the idea. He explained that they lacked the manpower and experience to confront Naruto, especially considering the inexperience of his team. They had lost the client and failed the mission, so they needed to return to Konoha. Amime was about to question his decision, but Konohamaru noticed the doubt and anger on her face and reiterated that it was an order. With that, the Konoha team began their journey back. Meanwhile, Naruto woke his team and commended their teamwork. He emphasized the need to improve their intimidation tactics and instructed them to reflect on their mistakes, asking for a report in a week's time. He then pointed to the tied-up Kojiro, indicating it was time to gather information from him. 30 minutes later, Team Naruto had efficiently dealt with the businessman and was on their way to confront the terrorist group threatening their village. They arrived at the hideout and waited for nightfall while scouting the area. Under the cover of darkness, Naruto and his team infiltrated the terrorists' hideout with precision. As they approached, the grim reality of the group's actions became apparent through the remnants of stolen belongings and signs of suffering. With an intensity his students had never witnessed, Naruto unleashed his full power, systematically taking down the terrorists. His team stood in awe, captivated by his skill and determination. In the depths of the hideout, Naruto discovered a woman with black hair and eyes, bound and bruised, on the brink of a terrible fate. Without hesitation, he eliminated her captors and freed her, offering comfort and reassurance. Through tears, the woman revealed her name was Shizuka and that her village had been destroyed by the terrorists, aided by rogue shinobi from the hidden mist. Some survivors had been enslaved with cursed seals for profit. Deeply moved, Naruto offered her refuge in Tanigakure, providing her with a chance to rebuild her life among those who would protect her. With their mission complete, Team Naruto began their journey back. 1 week later, in the Hokage's office, Minato questioned Konohamaru about their failure, incredulous that they had been paralyzed by fear and shock due to a mysterious man. Konohamaru fidgeted, indicating there was more to the story. Minato urged him to continue. Konohamaru suggested it might be better for his students and Minato's family to leave, but Menma, Narumi, and Kushina insisted they could stay. Konohamaru then instructed Ichiro and Hikaru to leave, and they complied, albeit reluctantly. Minato pressed for Konohamaru to finish his report. Finally, Konohamaru revealed that the mysterious man who had instilled fear in them was Naruto. The room fell silent as Minato processed this information. While Narumi's eyes filled with tears, Menma looked angry, and Kushina appeared shocked. Minato asked if it was really their Naruto, to which Konohamaru confirmed. Menma, frustrated, questioned what Naruto was doing there, assuming he was still banished. Narumi clarified that Naruto's banishment had been lifted after 13 years, allowing him to return to the Fire Country and Konoha. Konohamaru added that Naruto was likely the Jonin Sensei for the Genin. Kushina inquired about the village the Genin were from, and Amime mentioned that their headband featured 2 mountains with a line between them, catching Kushina off guard. Konohamaru pointed out the folder on Minato's desk, which contained relevant information. Minato opened the folder, discovering that Naruto would be in the village for the Chunin exams along with his students. Kushina then dismissed Konohamaru and Amime, allowing them to leave. As Amime exited, she vowed to herself that she would confront Naruto during the Chunin exams. After they left, Minato turned to Kushina and Menma, expressing the need to clear the air about Naruto. Narumi let out a breath, preparing for the difficult conversation ahead. Minato sighed, knowing that what he was about to say could tear his family apart. He began by stating that Naruto was innocent, prompting a shocked reaction from Kushina. Minato admitted they had all been wrong about Naruto, and the accusations and blame had been misguided. His gaze fell on Menma, who was visibly frustrated by the revelation. I remember what he did, yet they never provided any proof beyond Sakura's and Kaido's words. Minato interrupted, explaining that they later learned from Ino Yamanaka, who overheard Kaito speaking with Tobi, the hidden leader of Akatsuki. He paused, contemplating his next words. They had Inoichi conduct a mind search of Kaito and Sakura, revealing that both had framed Naruto, while Tobi had portrayed Naruto as a terrorist. It was all a lie they had inadvertently helped spread. Minato finished, a tear glistening in his eye. Kushina's hands trembled as she asked how long he had known. Minato sighed, admitting it had been 8 years. He had hesitated to share the truth, concerned about how it would affect her, especially since she was still grieving the aftermath of the incident, and Menma was mourning the loss of his girlfriend. Menma's expression darkened, his hands clenching into fists. He struggled with feelings of anger, disbelief, and betrayal, questioning why Minato had kept this from them for so long. Kushina shook her head, her breath uneven as she realized they had allowed their son to suffer, turning their backs on him. Tears filled her eyes as memories flooded back Naruto's absence, the silence surrounding his name, and their failure to question it. Minato lowered his gaze, filled with regret. He had thought he was protecting them and the village, but in doing so, he had abandoned his own son. He acknowledged the wrongs he had committed against Naruto, which he could never fully atone for. Kushina buried her face in her hands, lamenting how she had hated Naruto all this time for lies. Her voice cracked as she sobbed. Menma turned away, his expression unreadable as he muttered that Naruto was returning, questioning how they could expect him to listen after everything they had done. Narumi finally spoke up, suggesting that perhaps it wasn't them he would listen to, but someone else. When Menma inquired further, Narumi looked to Minato for approval. After a moment, Minato nodded, allowing her to continue. Narumi clarified that while Naruto might not care about them, he might care about Amime. Kushina questioned who Amime was and why Naruto would care about her. Narumi nervously revealed that Amime was Naruto's daughter, leading to a heavy silence. Kushina froze, her breath catching in her throat, while Menma's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing into a glare. He snapped, questioning the validity of this claim. Minato interjected firmly, confirming that Amime was indeed Naruto's flesh and blood. Kushina shook her head slowly, disbelief etched across her features. She struggled to comprehend how this was possible, recalling that Naruto had been just a boy when he left. Narumi gently reminded her that he was 18 when they had kicked him out, urging her to do the math. Kushina's knees nearly buckled as she gripped the table for support, overwhelmed by the revelation. Anger and sorrow intertwined in her voice as she demanded to know why they hadn't told her or Naruto. Narumi admitted they had been afraid of the implications, afraid of her reaction, and afraid of how Konoha would respond. After Naruto was gone, there had been no way to reach him. Menma's frustration boiled over as he questioned why they had kept such a significant secret, allowing Amime to grow up without knowing her father and letting Naruto live without knowing he had a daughter. Minato looked away, guilt heavy on his features, expressing his desire to tell Naruto but lamenting that by the time they discovered the truth, he was already gone, and Konoha had turned its back on him. Kushina covered her mouth with her hands, trembling at the thought of Naruto having a daughter who didn't even know him. Narumi reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, assuring her that they could still fix this. Naruto was coming to Konoha for the Chunin exams, and they could tell him then. Kushina closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks as she expressed doubt about whether Naruto would ever forgive them. Minato exhaled deeply, affirming that Naruto and Amime both deserved the truth. Meanwhile, Naruto stood in front of Akura's desk, fists clenched at his sides, struggling to contain his frustration. He locked eyes with the older man, firmly stating that he would not go. Akura leaned back in his chair, unimpressed, insisting that he was going as it was an order. Naruto's body tensed, fingers twitching as he reminded Akura of the pain the village had caused him and what they had taken from him. He had sworn never to return to that village again. Akura remained unmoved, folding his arms and asserting that this was not about Naruto's past, but about their village's future. The Chunin exams were an opportunity to showcase their strength, and they needed to send their best. Whether he liked it or not, Naruto was their best. Naruto scoffed, shaking his head and suggesting they send someone else, but Akura narrowed his eyes, explaining that none of the other shinobi carried the same weight as he did. The former outcast of Konoha, now standing tall as a warrior of Tanigakure, would send a powerful message. Naruto glared back, reminding Akura that he was not as strong as he once was, nor was Akura. The leader of Tanigakure glared in return, emphasizing the need to ensure their shinobi were strong enough before they proceeded. Naruto's jaw tightened, fingers curling into fists not from anger, but from the dull ache that reminded him of his dwindling time. He questioned whether they would be ready before it was too late, his voice cold but laced with bitterness. Akura exhaled sharply, leaning forward with determination. He acknowledged the disease slowly consuming them both, stating that they had no choice. The village and its people needed to be strong enough to stand on their own. If they died before that happened, everything they had fought for would be in vain. As Naruto approached the gates of Konoha, they loomed ahead, tall and unchanging. For most, they signified home, peace, and safety. But for Naruto Uzumaki, they represented betrayal. He stood at the threshold in silence, the headband of Tanigakure glinting under the sun, its symbol shining defiantly. Behind him stood his 3 students, Boten, whose smug arrogance was dulled by tension, Riku, whose usual humor had vanished under the weight of the moment, and Ayaka, whose fangirl excitement had transformed into uncertain awe. They all felt the pressure. The weight of the village that had once cast Naruto out pressed heavily on him. The guards at the gate stiffened upon seeing him. One recognized him instantly, his jaw clenched and eyes narrowed, while another muttered something under his breath, questioning why he had returned. Naruto ignored their whispers and stepped forward, the sound of his boots crunching softly against the dirt path as he crossed into the village that had once tried to destroy him. Each step deeper into Konoha felt like a knife in his chest. The streets remained unchanged, same markets, same alleys, same villagers, but the air was colder, filled with unspoken resentment. As the group made their way toward the inn arranged for foreign teams, whispers slithered through the crowd like poison. Questions about Naruto's presence filled the air, and he could feel the weight of every stare. Yet, he held his head high and kept his eyes forward, refusing to flinch. If they wanted to glare, let them. If they wanted to judge, let them. Naruto thought to himself that they could choke on their hate, just as he had. A cabbage seller scoffed as they passed, expressing surprise that Naruto had even been allowed in. One of his students, Boten, was ready to snap back, but Naruto raised a hand without looking, urging him to stay silent. They were not worth it. Riku, unable to contain himself, voiced his disbelief at the villagers' hypocrisy, questioning how they could cheer for the Hokage who had banished his own child. Ayaka, feeling the tension, cast nervous glances around, wondering if the villagers were always like this. Naruto suddenly stopped and turned to face his students. His expression was calm, perhaps too calm, as he shared his thoughts on the village's fickle nature. They only smiled when it was convenient, when someone bled or died for them, and they quickly forgot those who were gone. He recalled how they had forgotten him the moment he was locked away, with not a single person questioning it. He resumed walking, his students following him, the mood thick and suffocating like fog. As they passed a small training ground, a familiar face froze in place. Konohamaru Sarutobi. Disbelief turned to a scowl as their gazes locked for a brief moment, filled with unspoken tension. Naruto walked past him, leaving Konohamaru feeling the coldness of that gaze, as if he were invisible. Eventually, the team reached their designated inn. Naruto remained silent as he handed the innkeeper their papers, noting the barely concealed contempt in her expression. She directed them to their room, cautioning them not to cause any trouble. Naruto darkly assured her that he was not there to make friends. Later, in the privacy of his room, Naruto stood by the window, gazing out at the skyline of Konoha. The Hokage monument loomed in the distance, the face of Minato Namikaze carved into stone, untouched by guilt, unmoved by regret. Naruto's fists clenched in frustration. This place did not deserve to be called home. It felt more like a cage disguised as a village, a graveyard filled with smiling corpses. He had never wanted to return. Konoha meant nothing to him now, but Akura's orders had been clear. The Chunin exams were a stepping stone, and he would follow them, no matter the cost. His body was already paying that price. He wiped away the exhaustion that clung to him, feeling the ache in his chest that he could no longer ignore. A sharp pain rippled through him, relentless and consuming. The room was still, the weight of silence pressing against Naruto's chest as he stood by the window, staring out at the sprawling landscape of Konoha. The village appeared peaceful, bathed in the orange glow of the setting sun, but he knew how thin the veil of peace truly was. His hand rested against the cold windowsill, reminding him of the void within. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through his side, causing him to clutch his abdomen and gasp for air. The familiar grip of his illness tightened around him, and his vision blurred as sweat broke out on his forehead. The chakra sickness, a cruel ailment that drained the life force from those afflicted, had been consuming him for months. Akura had it too, and both had been battling this disease that had claimed many lives in their past. Naruto sank to the floor, clutching his stomach and trying to steady his breath. His heart raced, and memories of lost comrades flooded his mind. He recalled the final mission of White Dawn. The elite team Akura had formed a team built on trust and camaraderie. They had fought side by side, each willing to lay down their life for the others, but not all had made it. The disease had spread quickly after their last battle, tearing through the team like wildfire. Saito, a skilled medic with a heart of gold, had been the first to fall, his medical chakra unable to slow the progress. Ryo, the quiet warrior with deadly precision, had succumbed next, his once strong body deteriorating at a horrifying speed. Naruto had witnessed it all, too much of it. Friends and comrades slipping away from him. Now, as he sat hunched over on the floor, struggling to maintain his composure, he felt the same fate closing in on him. He clenched his fists, gritting his teeth as another wave of agony washed over him. The disease coursed through his veins, stealing the strength he had left. He muttered through clenched teeth that he would not end like this. The thought of Akura crossed his mind. He was just as close to the end as Naruto was. Their connection was the only thing keeping them going, both aware that by joining the fight, they had signed their death warrants. The disease was inevitable, but they had refused to die without a fight. The room was silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves outside the open window and the distant chirp of crickets. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, bathing the floor in a cold, silvery hue. Naruto sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless, his body glistening with sweat as the last wave of pain from his affliction receded. His breathing was ragged but steady. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eyes snapped him alert. In one fluid motion, Naruto reached for the kunai beneath his pillow but stopped short. A figure emerged from the shadows of the room, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a porcelain mask with a single red line carved across it. The mask of an ex-root agent. Naruto's expression hardened. The intruder stepped forward, removing the mask to reveal Renzo. Naruto didn't move, his fingers still brushing the handle of his weapon. Renzo offered a small, humorless smile and stated that he came to talk, just talk, with no tricks or ambush. Naruto scoffed, questioning Renzo's desperation in seeking a conversation. Renzo's tone shifted, becoming colder and heavier as he explained that Naruto was meant to be one of them. He emphasized that Konoha had betrayed Naruto, leaving him to rot, and that they were offering him the power to change that. Naruto stood slowly, eyes never leaving Renzo. He questioned whether Renzo wanted him to betray the village that had betrayed him. Renzo confirmed that Konoha needed to burn before it poisoned another generation and that they needed Naruto, who had been forged in pain, to tip the balance. Naruto's laugh was hollow as he asked what would happen if he said no. Renzo's smile vanished as he warned that Naruto would be in their way, and obstacles do not survive. Stepping forward, Naruto's voice was low and venomous as he expressed that he had not survived just to become what they feared. Renzo's jaw clenched at Naruto's refusal to protect those who had wronged him. Naruto clarified that he was not protecting them but what was left of himself. He had seen the destructive nature of Renzo's power and refused to hand over his soul. Renzo's disappointment was palpable as he declared that Naruto was choosing his own death. Naruto shrugged, stepping back toward the window, stating that he had already made peace with that. Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Renzo then warned that in 2 days, the Chunin exams would begin, and the opening ceremony would be the first spark. He predicted that the village would be brought to its knees while they pretended to be whole. Root would rise from the ashes, carving out a new order. As he slid his mask back on, Renzo told Naruto he had his chance and that there would be no mercy when the fire started. He vanished into the night like smoke on the wind. Naruto stood in silence, staring at the window long after Renzo had gone. His body trembled not from fear, but from the weight of the decision he had just made. They were coming, and the war would begin at dawn in 2 days' time. Turning away from the window, Naruto caught his reflection in the mirror on the far wall. For a second, he barely recognized the man staring back. He muttered that he hadn't come to be a hero, but perhaps he would leave as one. He reached for his flak vest and tied it around his waist. The countdown had begun. The air in the Hokage's office felt heavier than usual. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. Minato Namikaze stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. He had faced warlords, bijou, and death itself, but none of it weighed on him like this moment. There was a knock. Before Minato could answer, the door creaked open. Naruto Namikaze stepped into the room, clad in the sleek, dark gray attire of a Tanigakure shinobi. His eyes held no warmth, a deep scar marked his jawline, and his presence radiated restrained fury. He looked older than his age, weathered, wary, and emotionally armored. Naruto stated flatly that he had come because he was called, shutting the door behind him without waiting for an invitation. Minato turned slowly, addressing Naruto. But Naruto interrupted, insisting that Minato get to the point. Minato exhaled, acknowledging that it had been 18 years. Naruto snapped that it was Minato's fault, reminding him that he had chosen to believe a crying girl in torn clothes and a Yamanaka over his own son. He accused Minato of throwing him to the wolves without hesitation or questions. Minato flinched at the accusation, trying to explain that they had been wrong. But Naruto interrupted again, calling Minato weak and asserting that he had paid for it. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Naruto continued, his voice quiet but bitter, recounting the hell he had endured over the years: guards, beatings, and being declared a monster by his own parents. Minato sat down slowly, looking older and more fragile than Naruto remembered. He admitted that he could not undo the past but had something Naruto deserved to know. Naruto narrowed his eyes, demanding to know what it was. Minato hesitated. Before revealing that Naruto had a daughter. Naruto stared, the words not registering at first. When he finally responded, he questioned the validity of the claim, recalling that Ayame had told him the baby was aborted. Minato looked away, insisting that Ayame had lied and that the baby had survived, naming her Ayame. Naruto stepped back as if struck, refusing to believe it. He scoffed, expressing disbelief that after everything he had endured, Minato would now present him with a daughter as if it were a consolation prize. Minato's hands clenched as he explained that Ayame had grown up in Konoha, alone, believing Naruto had abandoned her and hating him for it. Naruto laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair, acknowledging that it made perfect sense for her to hate him. Minato insisted that she was his blood, but Naruto retorted that it hadn't mattered when he was theirs. Minato looked down, ashamed, acknowledging that he had failed Naruto. Naruto insisted that Minato had not just failed him, but had destroyed him. His voice trembled, not from weakness but from pure, suffocating restraint. The tension in the Hokage's office began to smolder into silence when a thunderous boom shook the building. The windows rattled violently, and a picture frame on Minato's desk toppled and shattered on the floor. Instincts kicking in, Naruto immediately pivoted. His chakra flared like a whip crack, controlled but deadly. Minato stood, alarm flashing in his eyes as the office doors slammed open with a force that echoed down the corridor. Narumi Namikaze burst in, her cloak trailing behind her like a storm cloud. Her face was pale, breath ragged, but her eyes were sharp. They were under attack. Minato's expression hardened as he asked where the attack was coming from. Narumi responded that it was from the North Quadrant training field. There were multiple explosions and coordinated strikes. It had to be Root. Her eyes flicked toward Naruto for a brief moment. Naruto's face remained unreadable, but his hand was already on the hilt of his kunai. Minato stepped around his desk and inquired about casualties. Narumi nodded grimly, reporting that several Chunin were down, with injuries only for now. But if the attackers got past the first line, they wouldn't, Naruto thought coldly. Minato looked at him, questioning whether Renzo would risk this now. Naruto didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward the window, where a rising plume of smoke could be seen in the distance. Renzo had said it would start with the exams, that the opening ceremony would be the spark. Narumi's eyes widened in surprise when she learned that Naruto had talked to Renzo. He had come to the inn and made an offer to burn Konoha with him, to finish what had been started by killing Danzo. Minato stiffened, asking if Naruto had refused. Naruto's lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl as he replied that he didn't need another puppet master. One village had already tried to script his death. Narumi stepped forward, emphasizing that they didn't have much time. If the attackers were making their move, the exams were just a cover. Another explosion sounded in the distance, louder this time, causing the ground to tremble beneath them. Minato looked between his children, the son he had cast away and the daughter who had stayed. Then they would fight, he said firmly. Together. Naruto didn't respond at first, but then he reached into his pouch, pulling out a black cloth and tying it around his forehead, the mark of Tanigakure shining defiantly against the fading gold of Konoha's sun. He made it clear that this was not an act of loyalty, he was not there for Minato. He paused just long enough to glance back, declaring that he was there to end this. With that, he vanished in a flicker of movement, reappearing in his room. Staggering into the washroom, he collapsed to his knees, feeling the metallic taste of blood fill his mouth as he gripped the edge of the basin. One truth settled heavily in his mind: this might be his final battle. Naruto stared as the water swirled around him, tinted crimson before disappearing down the drain. He looked up and met his reflection in the mirror, his bloodshot eyes framed by dark circles that hinted at sleepless nights. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed outside, followed by distant screams. Yet, he remained transfixed by his own gaze, lost in thought about his recent meeting with Minato. In his mind, he recalled Minato's quiet revelation that he had a daughter. The news had struck him like a bolt, but he buried his shock beneath a stoic exterior. He had been told that she was aborted, a lie that had left him resentful. Minato's words, however, revealed the truth. The baby had survived, and her name was Amime. A single tear traced down his cheek as he thought of Amime, the daughter he had never held, never raised, and who believed he had abandoned her. She had grown up thinking he chose silence over love, absence over fatherhood. Now, after all these years, what could he possibly say to her? How could he explain the pain of 18 years in a single moment? How could he ask for forgiveness from someone who had never known him? He clenched his fists, the tear falling silently to the floor. He whispered to the empty room that he hadn't abandoned her. It was they who had taken her away. Another explosion shook the air, followed by a knock on his door. With practiced ease, Naruto transformed into a version of himself that he had meticulously crafted and walked over to the door. In moments, his 3 students Boten, Riku, and Ayaka rushed into the room. Riku, visibly anxious, asked what the plan was. Naruto explained that it was an invasion and emphasized the importance of making their headbands visible to distinguish themselves from the attackers. He instructed them to help civilians to safety. Riku nodded, though he swallowed hard. Ayaka, her hand trembling slightly, expressed her fear of being attacked. Naruto reassured them, urging them to trust their training and each other. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders, reminding them of the challenges they had faced before and how he believed they were ready for this. Boten looked him in the eyes, asking if he would fight too. Despite the tightness in his chest, Naruto smirked, affirming that he wasn't there to watch from the sidelines. He flared his chakra slightly, a reminder that he had returned not as a ghost but as a protector. He took point, instructing them to stay close and to remember their duty as shinobi of Tanigakure. That he opened the door and stepped into the chaos outside. The sky was filled with smoke and fire, the sounds of battle echoing through the village he once called home. But this time he was not there for vengeance. He was there to protect and perhaps reclaim a part of himself. As he stepped into the open street, the roar of battle crashed over him like a tidal wave. The village was in disarray, buildings ablaze, smoke rising into the sky, and shinobi clashing at every corner. The familiar sight of Konoha engulfed in war tightened his chest, not from fear, but from the weight of bitter memories. Taking a deep breath, he pushed aside the pain and focused. He ran toward the north quadrant, where the first attack had originated. His shoes pounded against the broken stone as he dashed through smoke-filled alleys and shattered streets. The air grew heavier, thick with chakra and the scent of burning wood. Explosions echoed in the distance, accompanied by the cries of wounded shinobi. When he reached the edge of the northern battlefront, he crouched low on a rooftop, scanning the battlefield below. Chaos reigned as flames tore through the marketplace, and Konoha shinobi were outnumbered and ambushed by masked figures root operatives. Naruto's jaw clenched as he recognized their tactics, silent coordination and merciless efficiency. They were not here to conquer, they were here to erase. He watched as a Konoha Jonin attempted a counterattack, only to be swiftly taken down by a root operative. Another squad of Leaf Genin was surrounded, their backs against the flames as they fought to protect one another. Feeling a storm rise within him, Naruto launched forward in a flash of speed, landing beside the surrounded Genin. He commanded them to get down, and they obeyed without hesitation. His hands moved swiftly through hand seals, and he unleashed a powerful jutsu, blue flames erupting from his palms like a roaring dragon. The fire surged forward, cutting through the enemy ranks and forcing them to scatter. As the flames raged, Naruto stood resolute, his eyes cold and determined. He prepared for a more direct confrontation, releasing the seal on his hands to reveal double-sided axes. With fierce precision, he leaped into the fray, his movements a blur as he engaged the root operatives. Each swing of his axes was fueled by silent fury, cutting down enemies before they could react. One enemy attempted to counter with a kunai, but Naruto swiftly caught his wrist, shattering it with a twist before driving the axe deep into his chest. Another assailant approached from behind, but Naruto spun, his axe whirling through the air, dispatching him effortlessly. The battle raged on, and Naruto fought with a fierce resolve, determined to protect those who could not protect themselves. His chakra surged with every breath, blue fire liking the edges of his weapons, adding searing heat to every strike. They weren't just fighting a man, they were facing a force of vengeance, loss, and resolve. He didn't speak or hesitate. He fought like a ghost returning from hell, reminding the world of what it had cast aside. Naruto stood amidst the burning wreckage and bodies strewn across the north quadrant, the last of the root ambush unit writhing at his feet. With a final, merciless swing of his axe, he silenced the man's groans. Blood dripped from his weapons as the blue flames coating the blades slowly extinguished, their job done for now. He panted heavily, his shirt torn and singed, one shoulder bleeding from a glancing blow. The night sky above Konoha glowed red with fire and smoke, and the echoes of battle still resonated in the distance. He scanned the area, no chakra signatures nearby except his own. The north was secure. But then he felt faint pulses of foreign chakra from inside the village. Naruto narrowed his eyes, pressing 2 fingers to the ground. The chakra sensory technique revealed a web of energy stretching through the streets. His expression darkened. They were inside. The intruders had slipped past the outer defenses, and he recognized root suppression signatures clustered near the hospital and academy. He stood and unsealed a small scroll, releasing a flare into the air, a deep blue signal indicating the north quadrant was secured. Without wasting another second, he shined across the rooftops toward the heart of the village. He vowed that they wouldn't touch this place again, his eyes burning with fire and fury, feeling more alive than ever. He appeared on a building, looking down on the root operatives wreaking havoc in the village square. Civilians scattered in terror as kunai flew and fire jutsu exploded against the cobblestone. His fists clenched as he took in the scene, young genin shielding their siblings, a wounded chunin barely managing to hold his ground, and masked root operatives cutting through the chaos with mechanical efficiency. As the flames around Naruto's axes flickered in the present, his mind drifted back for just a moment to a quieter time, a better time. 18 years ago, the wind rustled softly through the trees just outside Konoha, where a small bench sat beneath a blooming cherry blossom tree. The sun was just beginning to set, casting warm gold across the village walls. Naruto sat there, one hand resting on Ayame's gently rounded belly, the other holding hers. She asked if their child would have his eyes, and he chuckled, hoping they would have hers instead. He wanted their child to grow up with her warmth and steadiness, not just his stubbornness and reckless chakra reserves. Ayame brushed her fingers against his cheek, assuring him that he was not reckless but passionate and loyal. She believed he would be a good father, better than he thought. Naruto expressed his disbelief at the idea of a little life being theirs and wondered if their child would want to be a ninja. Ayame promised they would support their child, regardless of their path, as long as they grew up happy and free from fear. Naruto vowed to protect them both, insisting that no one would hurt their child while he was alive. The memory faded as screams from the square snapped him back to reality. He stood taller, fire crackling around his body once more. He whispered to himself that he had promised to keep them safe, even if everything else was taken from him. With renewed determination, he launched himself into the heart of the battle again. Earlier that day, Amime awoke with sharp blue eyes narrowed in silent resolve. Today was supposed to be the start of the Chunin exams, a stage 2. Prove herself as a kunoichi and someone strong worthy of her name, forged alone without a father. As she tied her hair back into her signature braid, thoughts of Naruto Uzumaki churned in her mind. The name made her grip her kunai tighter. He was the man who had abandoned her mother, never came looking for her, and left her to grow up in whispers and shame. She trained harder than anyone to erase the shadow of that name, aiming to outshine it and stand above him not just in skill, but in judgment. She envisioned delivering the punishment he never saw coming, a blade in his chest, followed by the truth whispered into his ear just before the end, "I'm your daughter. And this is what you deserve." As she stood with her teammates, waiting for the exams to begin, the air suddenly cracked with explosions, followed by screams and rising fire. The invasion had begun. Amime stood frozen for a moment, watching the chaos unfold. Her teammates moved to help civilians, but she saw him a flash of blonde, the fire-cloaked silhouette, and the fury in his eyes. She recognized him instantly, not from any picture, but from the way people whispered about him and how her mother used to look away when his name came up. He was Naruto. Without hesitation, she slipped away from the crowd, weaving through burning alleys and broken walls, her eyes locked on her target. Her fingers brushed the hilt of the sword strapped to her back, her own weapon, laced with a toxin she had developed herself. It was a blend of paralytics and chakra disruptors, enough to incapacitate even a seasoned Jonin if struck right. She climbed silently to a rooftop as Naruto tore through a group of root operatives below, axes engulfed in flames. He didn't see her, not yet. He looked like a hero. But to her, he was the villain in her story. She leapt without a sound, falling from the sky like a phantom. Just as he turned, perhaps sensing something, perhaps not fast enough, she drove the poisoned blade straight into his lower back, beneath the ribs. He staggered forward, blood escaping his lips, his eyes widening in confusion and pain. And then he saw her, Amime, standing there, her expression cold and unreadable. Her hand remained on the hilt, embedded in his side. She leaned closer, her voice cold as ice, revealing a shocking truth. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. She twisted the blade slowly and whispered that she was his daughter. Naruto's breath caught in his throat, the intense pain in his side momentarily forgotten. The revelation struck him harder than the blade still lodged in his back. He staggered forward, gripping the edge of the building as the chaos of battle raged below. Yet, all he could focus on was her voice and her furious, cold expression twisted with betrayal. Daughter? The realization overwhelmed him, and his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the rooftop, the blade slipping out with a soft sound. Blood flowed from the wound, dark and heavy. His chakra struggled to stabilize, tainted by the poison she had infused into the steel. He whispered her name, Amime, barely able to form the words. The world around him tilted. Amime. The daughter he believed had never existed. The daughter Ayame claimed she had aborted, her final cruel act after calling him a demon, after striking him in that prison cell, and after walking away from him and the future they were meant to share. I'm getting rid of this demon spawn in my womb. Those words echoed in his mind like a curse. He thought she had meant it. He believed her. Everyone else did. He never dared to hope otherwise. Naruto's heart ached with disbelief and sorrow. Ayame had lied. The burning pain from his wound paled in comparison to the hurt inside him. His daughter, the child he wanted more than anything. The reason he built a house. The reason he smiled back then, even through the glares. He had walked proudly through the village, enduring it all because of her. For her. She was the future he clung to while he rotted in a cell, while he suffered under a guard's baton, while he dragged himself past the charred remains of Kitsu and the ashes of his life. And now, she hated him. She looked at him the way they looked at him. As if he was a monster. As if he deserved nothing but betrayal. Naruto's vision swam as he clutched the rooftop tiles. He could feel the chakra poison coursing through him, shutting down his system. He forced himself to stay conscious, gritting his teeth, shaking with agony and despair. He would have loved her. He wanted her. He tried to fight for them. A laugh escaped his lips, broken and bitter. Was this what fate wanted? For him to be betrayed by blood twice? First his parents. Then I am. Now his own child. His head slumped forward. Somewhere below, the battle continued. But to Naruto, the world was suddenly quiet. Hollow. The man who had survived exile, torture, betrayal, and war now sat bleeding out on a rooftop, not because of a weapon or a technique, but because of a truth. Because his daughter had turned against him. And he couldn't even blame her. He should have looked for her. He should have known. His eyes blurred with tears. For the first time in years, Naruto wanted to give up. The battle reached its peak. Root operatives swarmed the village center, their movements swift and calculated. But they hadn't accounted for Naruto Uzumaki. Despite the poison searing through his veins, despite the betrayal lodged in his heart, Naruto stood tall once more. With a fierce roar, he slammed his bloodied palm into the stone beneath him. Blue fire style, hellfire bloom. The ground cracked, and a massive lotus of searing blue flames erupted in the square, encasing the enemy root shinobi in a dome of fire and chakra that burned away their illusions, melted through their armor, and silenced their cries. The technique burned hotter than any fire ever created, fueled by a man with nothing left to lose. Aftermath, rooftop of the Hokage Tower. Smoke curled from the cratered streets. The sky was painted orange with the last flickers of fire as the final root operative fell, defeated. Naruto stumbled again, dropping to his knees. He couldn't feel his fingers. His vision darkened at the edges. The poison was winning. He coughed hard, blood staining his hand as he looked up at the girl now standing across from him, sword trembling in her hand, her expression unreadable. Amime stood there, confused and angry. She hadn't expected kindness from him. Naruto reached out, barely lifting his hand. He wanted to teach her everything, even if she hated him. Amime tensed, unsure what to feel, her fingers tightening on the hilt of the sword still marked by his blood. Naruto placed his palm over his heart, and with his final ounce of strength, his chakra flared one last time, blue and gold, swirling in soft spirals like wind and flame. Memory seal, legacy flame. A strand of his chakra split from his core, spiraling forward gently, like a glowing ribbon. It entered Aime's chest, unnoticed by anyone else. A seal bloomed faintly beneath her collarbone, shaped like a swirling leaf surrounded by 3 flames. Someday, when you're ready to know the truth, you'll hear my voice again. And you'll see everything they did. Everything I never got to say. Naruto smiled. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. My little girl. His body slumped forward. Seconds later, Sensei. 3 figures streaked toward the rooftop. Riku, wide-eyed and frantic, dropped to his knees beside him. He couldn't believe what he saw. Boten was quiet, but his face was pale, clenched in agony. He realized the truth of Naruto's battle. Ayaka was sobbing, grabbing Naruto's hand with both of hers. She couldn't accept that he might leave them. Naruto's breathing was shallow, and his lips barely moved. He weakly curled his fingers around Ayaka's hand, urging her not to let them twist her like they had twisted him. He wanted them to live for themselves, to live free. With a final exhale, his hand went limp, and the wind stilled. The man who had endured so much, the shinobi who never gave up, the father who never had the chance. Naruto passed away, surrounded not by enemies, but by the students who loved him, just as he had wished. 2 days later, at the Hidden Valley Cemetery in Tanigakure, the mountains were silent. Clouds hung low, heavy with rain that matched the grief in the hearts of those gathered on the grassy plateau above the village. At the center stood a newly dug grave, surrounded by stone lanterns lit with blue flames. Naruto Uzumaki, a shinobi who had been broken, betrayed, and banished, had still chosen to protect. Now, he would finally be laid to rest in the only village that had ever welcomed him after the world turned its back. A carved stone marked the head of the grave, bearing only his name and a simple epitaph etched by the village elder, Akura, before his own passing. He carried the burden of peace in silence. A leaf burned, a flame reborn. A small crowd gathered. At the front stood Riku, his spiky black and white hair soaked in the rain, fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles bled. Beside him, Boten remained still, eyes closed as if trying to freeze this moment because accepting that their sensei was truly gone felt unbearable. Ayaka sobbed uncontrollably, clutching Naruto's old scarf like a lifeline. Next to them, in a black kimono with violet trim, stood Shizuka, her hand resting gently on the coffin. Her expression was unreadable. Her eyes were dry only because she had cried for days until there were no tears left. She placed a white chrysanthemum on the lid and whispered a promise to her fallen sensei. The villagers of Tanigakure stood in respectful silence behind them, farmers, shinobi, elders, all who had come to honor the man who had saved their village one last time. From Konoha, they arrived silently. Minato Namikaze, older now, wore a dark cloak soaked to the bone. His expression was hollow as he focused on the coffin. Kushina stood just behind him, struggling to maintain her composure, her fingers trembling at her sides. She had cried all her tears the day she learned the truth. Narumi stepped forward, jaw tight and eyes burning, kneeling beside the grave. She placed a single folded paper crane on the wood, Naruto's favorite origami from childhood. Her voice cracked as she expressed her sorrow for taking so long to find him and believe in him. Menma stood at a distance, shoulders stiff, unable to look at the coffin. He would carry the shame of having once hated his brother forever. An elder from Tanigakure stepped forward to begin the rites but was stopped gently by Shizuka. She shook her head and looked to the three students Naruto's legacy. Riku took a shaky breath and stepped up, holding a weathered scroll that Naruto had once given him. He spoke of their sensei, calling him an idiot but claiming him as their idiot. He vowed that they would not give up, just as he had never given up on them. He turned to the Konoha delegation, his eyes hardening as he reminded them that even when the world turned against Naruto, he still saved it. He challenged them not to call him a hero unless they were ready to carry the weight of their failures. Minato lowered his head in silence. As the coffin was lowered, shovels of dirt were dropped slowly, first by Riku, then Boten and Ayaka. Shizuka knelt one last time, brushing her fingers across the soil, vowing to love him even in the next life. Finally, Kushina knelt at her son's grave, whispering through clenched teeth a plea for forgiveness. Narumi and Menma said nothing. There were no words left to give. As the rain poured down, a single gust of warm wind swept across the mountainside, rising from the grave toward the gray sky. Beneath Aime's skin, the seal pulsed softly, a flicker of chakra and memory waiting and watching. One day, the truth would awaken.